The wheel of time turns, and ages come and go, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth returns again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose above the binge empire. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. What's up, everybody, and welcome to Binge Empire, Bingetown TV's new fantasy and sci-fi podcast. Today we are here, as I'm sure you are aware, to cover the season 3 premiere of Amazon Prime's The Wheel of Time. So it's been nearly 2 years since we've covered Wheel of Time, and a lot has happened since then. You know, the Eagles are current Super Bowl champions. Paul, absent tonight, is engaged. Dave and I won a volleyball championship. Luke and I won a fantasy championship or two. You get the idea. We're out here. We're doing things. Moves are being made in the background. I am just going to, I guess, introduce myself very quickly. My name is Kyle. I will be kind of the host, let's say, for all of these episodes. Multiple time book reader. My role is kind of just to move us along and try to provide as much book context as I can to what we saw on our screens. And then I'm just going to pass it to Luke. He'll reintroduce
Mhm.
himself, talk a little bit about his role as well.
So I'm Luke, aka Lanfear's son, because she is mommy. I am also a book reader. I've only been through the books one time, and I actually can't remember the timeline of when I finished it relative to season two, but I do not consider myself a subject matter expert by any measure. I love the source material of Wheel of Time. I love all the theory talk, whether it's books or show only, but I am not somebody that gets hung up on it being a perfect one to one adaptation like some of Twitter of Time. I know I've been seeing that conversation pretty much anytime we get new Wheel Time content. There's always that discussion of how accurate they are to the books. I'm somebody that can completely enjoy this as its own separate entity because there are so many changes, and we are going to have to truncate the 14 book series so much that I think we just need to take everything we're getting in stride, take it at face value, and see what we like and dislike as a show rather than as an adaptation. So I think that's really important, at least from me and Kyle's perspective, because I find that we're a slightly more positive on this show as a whole compared to Die Hard book cloak. What are they called again? Book cloaks or yeah, book cloaks, right? So a little bit out of the game since I finished the book series, I think over a year ago at this point. So we'll get the pronunciations down again. We are very comfortable with the first two seasons of the show, having have watched Unraveling the Wheel. I believe his YouTube video, right, Kyle? Is that who it is? Unraveling the Wheel.
Yeah, I wasn't anticipating being on the spot with that, but I'm going to say yes.
Pretty sure that's the YouTube video that did an amazing job of summarizing season 1 and 2, giving some important lore background, and I'm sure Dave took a lot of value from that too, but I feel so back. I love Randall Thor. I'm ready to freaking talk about all of this. Dave, so passing it over to you.
All righty. My name is Dave. I am Lan's son since Lan is daddy. I am me and Paul are the only non-book readers here on the show. So my experience with the Wheel of Time is solely through what we get through the show. I'm going to emphasize what Luke was just saying with pronunciations, especially since I don't read the books or listen to the audiobooks. And we get screeners on top of it with no subtitles. So I am as ice cold as it gets with names of objects. And I just ask everyone to just bear with us as we kind of adjust and get our bearings there. But yeah, no experience with any of the books. I have been definitely one of the show watchers that has loved the show through it all. Some minor complaints here and there, but overall, I really think this show has been incredible. I've had it at the top of my B tier, ready to just jump it into the A tier category with this season, and hopefully it lives up to expectations. As we're about to get into episode one of this season, turns out to be one of my favorite episodes of the series so far. I think Wheel of Time has absolutely nailed every premiere that they've done back even in season one. That premiere was incredible. Season two premieres was another top five episode. And then this one also fitting into that category. So really excited to be back here. It has been a long 2 years. I'm just so happy to see everyone on the Wheel of Time again, and I can't wait to get into it.
A long 2 years, yeah, because Dave, you were our energy guy I believe you were dubbed in season 2,
Was that?
constantly labeling the show S tier, so obviously it slid in those 2
Okay.
years between viewings, which is
I
totally
think,
fine, doesn't really matter.
I think a lot of the discussions that we've had on the side since the season 2 release have made me cool down a little bit, but regardless, I think I'm willing to make it into the next tier of shows with this season.
Yeah, sounds good. And like we've mentioned, Paul is not joining us today for this episode. Potentially, maybe not for episode 2, 3. We'll see how it all goes. We're busy covering a lot of other things on other podcasts that we have, which we'll probably talk about a little bit throughout this episode. But Paul will join us later in the season. As Dave mentioned, not a book reader. So Paul is show only, and Paul's imagination runs wild as he watches the show and always throws a bunch
Which
of
is
theories around. If you weren't with us seasons 1 and 2, I have been trying to keep track of all of the things that Dave and Paul have put on the board of their predictions for things. So as we get through this season, I'll try to call those things out and see whether they've been confirmed, denied, and then obviously we'll be adding things to the board. One last comment before we get into the episode itself. It was Unraveling the Pattern is the YouTube channel which created
Mm.
the video, which those two had watched before to prepare for this season. And shout out to Unraveling the Pattern because they make great content around the Wheel of Time. And then this final thing before we get into the episode is just classic Bingetown housekeeping, a little explanation of how we actually cover this show. We'll take it in what we call just kind of buckets, story buckets. So we'll try to organize scenes as much as we can into related buckets. So we're kind of having a larger conversation instead of maybe nitpicking every single thing that happens. Sometimes it gets away with from us rather, and we get a little bit in the weeds. But that's the goal for this. As our characters split apart, we'll take things from settings and all of that stuff, and that'll lead us right into this episode. So the first bucket that I have here, I've just labeled it the sitting of the hall. This is kind of broken into 3 pieces itself. This is our cold open to the season. Hectic, let's say, in one word. We kind of have the battle that happens in the hall with all of the madness that goes there. We have Varen's little side quest involved, and then we have a battle in the streets. I think we maybe take it maybe just the battle in the hall as the first part. There's a lot of things that happened here.
All I'm gonna say is that it has been 2 years and not even 3 minutes into the show, they have to just immediately insert us into this situation. I literally was sitting there, I couldn't even process what was even going on, honestly, in the first watch through. I was just completely shocked at the events that were culminating here. I mean, Landrin has just skyrocketed. It's my most hated character in the show. I don't know if you guys can agree with that, but she is easily my least favorite part now. Not saying that, she's a bad actress or anything. Like, I think the show is making us want to hate her, but there was a point where I was feeling bad for her last season and kind of thinking, maybe she's one of us. And nope, just fully commits to the Black Aja, which had been rumored, only rumored at this point, making their debut here. An incredible scene. I mean, Kyle, I'm going to keep ranting a little bit here. Kyle watched the episode a little bit before Luke and I, and immediately comes at us saying that the quality of this episode is better than any episode that we've seen before. Completely agree with you in that statement. I mean, it was so intense seeing the Ajas battling here. I mean, I completely forgot how gruesome this show can get too, with how one of the Ajas gets completely sliced in half by the wind magic. Just so much to dissect here, but overall, this scene was just an incredible way to jump back in. Again, it was it maybe jumped in a little too aggressively for me at some points, you know?
So, one thing I wanna just say is that I think if you were when the show is complete, hopefully it does get all the seasons and actually gets to finish the story, as a person coming into the story and being able to binge through season 1 into season 2 directly into this season without that huge gap in between 2 and 3, I think they did a phenomenal job as at trying to connect the reveal that the Dragon Reborn is back, the prophecy that Moraine used the fire dragon to kinda announce to the world at Falm, to the world, like, saying that the Dragon Reborn is back. They showed you the weight of that by all throughout season 2, seeing how organized and seeing how professional the White Tower is and all the Aes Sedai politics are, but then you get thrown right into this, and the fact that they're going against the sitters, like, they're splitting between the different colors, they're killing sisters. The weight of that will probably hit harder if you're not familiar with the books through a binge, because the last time we were here, it was not this chaotic, and I thought that they captured it well just because I guess I do know some of the background politics going on, but Leandrin, I think we are a podcast that supports her as a character we love to hate, and I think she
Mhm.
fulfilled that amazingly here. Like, the makeup of the blood was so dark and scary. She did a great job, and I just got straight chills when they call Nynaeve to the court to kind of be the character witness and say what's happening, because Leandra knows there's no freaking way out. They can't lie, she can because she's Black Aja and all that, so it just jump started in the best way. The warders got locked out of the hall, so we knew that it couldn't just be a simple have all the protectors come in. Like, it had to be this way, and I thought that the chaos added to it. I really need to watch this again. Just unfortunately, by the nature of when we got these screeners and when the episode's going to air for you all, we had to kind of binge it. And like Dave said, no subtitles is tough for a fantasy show, not just Wheel of Time. Very tough. But I think we got a good grasp of what was going on here, and I felt the weight of it all. I thought it was an amazing action sequence, and it actually ended up taking up like a third of the episode before we got that title sequence. But that includes all the stuff with like Varen and Swan. So it was just so much to break down. I don't know what we want to start talking about specifically, but if I could put something forth, I don't know. Do we want to stay just in the room? Because if not, I want to just go ahead.
That's a good
You give your
question. I
piece.
don't know. Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say that I think the events in the room probably make a little sense to cover first, just from the perspective of we are getting this immediate continuation. And Dave, I'm just gonna point out that you talking about how you felt bad for Leandrin in season 2 was one of my funniest parts of re-listening to our season 2 coverage of you and Paul just being so non-committal to being like, she's Black Aja, like she's a dark friend, and you guys ping-ponged that all season, literally all the way until you could not possibly deny that she was a dark friend, and then we
Yeah.
opened this episode, and I loved the her way she acted of just like, "Well, I tried, like,
Mm.
whatever," and then she
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
Avengers Assemble, I guess whatever the opposite of the Avengers is, assemble, and I wanna call out the wind blades, the magic stuff just looks absolutely insane. I mean, it literally it looked good last season. I didn't think it would get better, and I think they got better at doing the CGI of the channeling of the weaves and all of those things, and now that I'm actually looking at my notes too here, like, there's really not a ton beyond commenting on the action here in the
Yeah,
hall.
Mhm.
So
we're
the last thing I'll comment on, or 2 things actually I'll say, is that, Liana, the keeper of the hall, keeper of
Oh
the
my
chronicles, who
god.
has the staff,
Yeah.
going beast mode on that woman's head was insane. I did
I
not
said
see
out
that
loud,
coming.
like, I could not believe what the fuck I was watching right there when she just destroyed her. That was so cool.
Mhm.
And then the second thing I'll mention here, and we'll get to them in the battle in the streets, which we'll talk about, I assume, right after this, is gonna be we have the green sister that shows up in the hallway. Her name is Jean. She is, like, described in the books as hating men, even though she's a green, like, she likes to almost kinda, like, torture her warders. Very quick characterization of her. You literally get it in this scene where her warders die, and she's like, "Oh my," like, it feels good to her that she feels them dying. That's typical Black Aja right there. And then Chesmal Emery is the white, or I'm sorry, the yellow sister that's next to her. These are just names that are going to keep coming up. So just want to reinforce them as we go along.
I
Mhm.
do have a couple questions here. So
Yeah.
at the very beginning, we see Leandrin with a couple of her red Ajas, and those red Ajas tell Leandrin, hey, no matter what happens in there, we are on your side. But those two red Ajas come back to the room and they are met with hostility from the warders that are trapped outside because everyone assumes they are on Leandrin's side, but they end up not being on Leandrin's side. So is that just kind of emphasizing that even those who were very loyal to Leandrin s- still maybe didn't know this about her? Because again, they were totally saying at the beginning, we'll ride or die for you, Leandrin. But then they try and kind of de escalate the situation with the others.
Yeah, that's I think exactly what you're supposed to take away from that. They mention it how they were going to go into the hall with her, but then the Amerlin seat, Swan Sanche closes the meeting, let's say, to the red sitters. So as you can see, when we're in there, we have 3 people from each of the Ajas. There's 3 people of each color. Is probably the layman's way to say it in the room, except for the reds. So they don't want any reds to be involved. I guess they're assuming from their perspective, they being like Swan, Liana, Alana, that all of the Reds that are close to Liandrin are Black Aja maybe as well. Turns out they're in every Aja. So
Mm.
I think that that's exactly what you're supposed to take away with it. What you just said is that these people were loyal to Liandrin, but seemed to be unaware that she was actually Black Aja.
Okay, and then my second question was, you already touched on it, so I'm gonna bring it up here, is you said I think her name was Jean is the green Aja that has her
Yes, yeah.
warders dead. So she does make that comment like, "Oh, there's so much death, like, it feels great." Is that I at first took it as, okay, Black Aja are gaining power from death, but is it more so just the sensation of losing the warder rather than it feeling really bad like we see later on? It's just the opposite effect on them?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's them gaining any type of power, they're still channeling the one power in the same way. I just think
Okay,
she herself is, like, probably a masochist, has some type
okay.
of mental irregularity, let's say, in where
Yeah.
she's enjoying that,
Okay.
but that has nothing, I would say, to do with their power itself.
Okay, because it seemed like when she said that, she kind of got a burst of, like, energy or felt like she got a burst of power from it, but I just wanted that clarification.
Yeah. Yeah, no worries at all. And I guess sorry, one last thing I'll say, I just love that Swan kind of acknowledges that like, we know that what Leandrin's accusing Swan Sanche, the Amberlin seed of, is correct. Like, that happened
Mhm.
in season 2. She's actually not lying, but then
But there's
Swan's
no
like,
proof.
"Well, yeah, yeah, if you were telling the truth, then you would have all the right in the world to, like, sanction me, depose me, all that stuff, but" and then she just completely flips it on her. That might be
Mhm.
something, to monitor going forward, and that is kind of still the truth that's hanging around in the background of all of this. So just very
And
quickly okay.
Yep. Just want to say that Swan is again highlighted here as being basically the strongest Aes Sedai. She was destroying Landrin before she got to link up with some of the other sisters, which, if you remember, is essentially just connecting their powers together, and it's like an exponential gain. So that's the only reason that she got outpowered because she is still like the goat right now. But like I think you were just about to transition us over to the other pieces of it, so we can now kind of talk about Varen and what's going on there, and then we'll go out to the street.
Yeah, I just think Varen just very quickly, Varen was a very popular character for us in season 2. She copped a lot of MVP votes early
Hmm.
in season 2. If you're not
Mhm.
familiar with our coverage, we always at the end of each episode, each of us votes on an MVP and an LVP for the episode. And I didn't expect this. Naomi Sedai is, not a character in the books, so this was a complete blindside, I think, to anyone that was watching this book readers show only alike, and, I mean, this is a big W for the Black Asha. They come in here and she gets whatever was hiding behind that secret trap door, so
So I think we it's safe to say that it's the Angreal and Terangreal, right? Like it's just whatever cache. It's like a cache of just magical items that they're going to use to give to the Black Aja.
And they
But
said it was specifically their strongest on Grial and Tongrial.
yeah, it's probably the biggest source on the. It's probably the biggest collection on the side of the light, probably anywhere in the continent.
It
So it's
wasn't even
huge that they
known
took it.
it wasn't
Yeah,
even all the sisters weren't even aware of it. Like, some of them thought it was just rumors too.
yeah. But I think that's pretty much all that happens there
Yeah.
before she knocks them out, and then she goes and then we have Alana coming out, and I love Alana. She's the green sister with the 2 warders who, man, RIP. 1 warder, I should say,
Yeah.
but this was just the show's way of getting us reacclimated with every single one of the sisters, and it also kind of power scaled us a lot. Like, you saw how strong Alana was here. She's one of Is she a sitter too? Believe so?
that's actually a
Can't
great
remember if she's a
question.
sitter, but sh if she's not a
I
sitter, she's up there in terms of, like, political prowess and connections to Moraine and Swan and stuff, so that's all you gotta know 'cause she's awesome. I do like Alana.
wasn't expecting the acrobatics.
Oh, yeah, the
You
flips
know?
and stuff,
She
yeah,
just
that was
did,
pretty
like yeah, like,
cool.
a complete, like, front twist over
Yeah.
whatever weave that was thrown at her, which was pretty funny. And again, we're getting just a lot of interesting uses of channeling and the weaves here in these fights. The way that they're, like, kind of using them as shields looks so interesting. They're like circular shields, and then they're also like coating their arms defensively and then also using it offensively. Again, like you're saying, like this almost felt like them showing off at the start of the season, like shit's gotten real. We're really good at this CGI stuff. Like
Mhm.
these women are badasses. Like here's just the reminder you all needed to get kind of acclimated rather with this world. I'm just kind of curious if I guess maybe specifically you, Luke, what you think about the fact that they kind of stabbed Leandrin through the heart twice.
I was literally gonna say, not just this scene, but the scene later with, the not the bubble, but, like, whatever Lanfear's doing at the end of this episode to all of the, Emmonsfield 5. if they told you one thing this episode, it was to hype up how good and overpowered Aes Sedai healing is. Because you can just take stabs as long as you have another sister that's there that's good at healing. But this is a rule. I don't remember if they ever established in the show. I'm sure they did in season one. A sister can never use the power to heal herself. So it's very important that other sisters are around. So like later, I know I'm skipping ahead here, when Nynaeve gets stabbed, if there wasn't somebody like Moraine's level of healing around, she was dead. There was nothing that could have happened. But that aside, I did think it was insane when two, swords go right through her body. I literally thought, I was like, oh, I'm not even going to say that, but either way, it blew my mind. Yes, yes, yes. I got to watch what I'm saying because I don't remember what level of spoiler we can talk at. But either way, Dave, what did you think about when she took the two blades through her stomach
Oh,
and chest?
I mean, I didn't think that was gonna be the end of Leandrin after we're already, she's making her escape. She's this grand player in all of this, at least we've been led to believe. I mean, it was a second where I was like, "Okay, Alana wasn't lying when she said Leandrin's not gonna leave here alive." But, yeah, they do have the 3 what was it, 4 sisters around her to help her out.
Hmm.
Question kind of going into this whole thing, I guess, is kind of power scale me like warders to Aes Sedai. Does a warder ever have a chance one on one with an Aes Sedai? Because one, when Leandrin takes 2 shots to the chest, I was shocked. But then, of course, our boy takes one and he's down for the count immediately. I'm just trying to. And earlier on, too, we have Jean's warders get completely obliterated in one blast when, they were making the confrontation.
I have 2 takes on that. The first one is maybe to address the more general question. I would say one-on-one, we understand we're having a physical confrontation that a warder probably stands no chance against an Aes Sedai. The only chance would be, like, an element of surprise, an element
Like,
of, like, a
using the
situation where you could
environment.
yeah, where you could use your quickness kind
Mhm,
of against them. I would say they move faster than Aes Sedai move. But
mhm.
in terms of, like, if we know we're banging bodies, then Aes
Yeah,
Sedai is probably gonna win that 9.999 times out of 10.
okay.
Land might
And
be that point one.
hey,
Yeah, daddy.
and, the other question, or maybe the other point I'm gonna say is that I agree with you 100%. I thought it was very obvious that Leandrin was able to take 2 swords, not really die immediately, while Yvonne is the name of Alana's warder that dies. He kind of almost seems to die instantly. It didn't seem like Alana tried to heal him whatsoever. That was kind of my main gripe with this, is that it just felt a little unnecessary to stab Leandrin through the heart. You could have
Hmm.
injured her.
Mhm,
I thought it was sweet when both of Alana's warders, Yvonne, who is, the black bald man who ends up dying, and then we have Maskim, who is the white man with the kind of longer shoulder length hair. When they're kinda coming in for the decapitation
mm,
and, like, the black Aja that are with Leandrin stop it, that, like, looked awesome. It looked so
Yeah.
cool, like, I
They
just
just like
wish they
catch
didn't
it.
go as yeah, I just wish they didn't go as far as they did with Leandrin. But, to make the comment too on the healing stuff, so Chesmal Emry, like I mentioned earlier, is the yellow sister that's with Leandrin. I believe she's an Asian woman in the show. She is renowned as, like, she is a yellow Aja. She's renowned as, like, one of the best healers in the White Tower.
Yeah,
okay.
So,
yellow's
I
the
don't know if they
healing
were
Aja.
I
Yeah.
I
remember
don't know if
that.
they were making a comment on that, but she is known like, before Nynaeve got to the tower, it was like, "This woman has, like, the most talent in healing of any of the current Aes Sedai." So that's
Okay.
obviously a big feather in the cap of Liandrin's squad here.
Mhm,
So let's
okay.
take home the outside piece here. Unless you have other comments, stop me now. I was just going to take it over right to Swan because another showing of how awesomely powerful she was. She was about to take on basically the other the dark friends that were there, but they overpowered her. And I love the visual of what shielding looks like now. It seems like like you said, Kyle, like they're leaning into how good CGI money can be from Amazon when you get that blank check, and it looked awesome. And just even when when she eventually breaks out after Moraine comes to save her, Moraine looked badass with the power fully wielded like that around her, and she actually saved her because Moraine's also super powerful. And then she frees her and all that stuff happens like towards the end. Um, but yeah, like I just wanted to point out that like Swan didn't have a great victory rate, but she was still showing her power levels, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, they have so the bald Aes Sedai, who's Black Aja, she had a little bit big of a role, let's say, I think it's season 2, season 1. She's been around. Her name's Joya. She'll just be a character we will assume going forward. She even says, like, "I literally can't hold her in the shield."
Mhm,
Like,
Mhm.
Swan is, like, crawling out
yep,
of it, and I think one of the VFX, maybe not supervisors, had something like that, even mentioned, like, "We wanted to go into this season and change up the look of the shield. We wanted it to look like it was literally physically something like with vacuum-like properties, like
yeah,
sealing over people, and it came off and it looked fan-fucking-tastic. And the second point I'll make is that I agree with the Moraine thing too. She was stanced up after she has like the green and yellow weave like coming out of her to stop the
mhm,
parts of the rocks falling on a swan, and I was like, "Damn, she looks good."
yeah,
Did Moraine know this was all going down the did her and Swan know? Because obviously we see Moraine at the beginning of the episode kind of looking onto the tower, and then later on she sees the explosion, which she's not too surprised about. She just knows that it's her time to leave. So I know Moraine and Swan, have a very deep connection, and they are very competent and capable of planning for something like this. So maybe they weren't expecting it to go down maybe this second, but it did look like Moraine was kind of prepared almost.
I would say that I'm not sure that if you did maybe rewatch the full season 2, it maybe that isn't as obvious or easy to remember, but they are completely on the outs, the 2 of them. So at the end of season 2, when Rand kind of escapes, Swan's prison, let's say,
Mhm.
and they go through the ways with Lanfear and Lan and Moraine,
mhm,
that's, like, the decision where Swan's like, "Don't go, like, stay here, keep
Right.
him here," and Moraine makes the decision to take him to Falme, and that was, like, I don't wanna say the severing of their relationship, because
Right.
that
Okay.
sounds very final, but
Mhm.
they're completely on the outs. I think Moraine is
yeah,
aware of what's happening in Tarvalon, obviously.
Mhm.
She's speaking to Nynaeve. I'm sure Nynaeve was aware that she was being called to court as a witness, so she kind of has ears to the ground in that way, but she's not very involved in all of it at this point.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say is just rest in peace, Yvonne, because I'm pretty sure last season me and Paul kind of gassed him up a little bit, especially during my boy Land's down periods of him and Moraine kind of fighting all the time. They really kind of helped him see the light. So he a very great character there. It's sad to see him go.
Yeah, it kinda stinks, man, because he doesn't die in the books.
Oh, really?
I mean, not on screen. I mean, maybe he dies of old age later, but no. So,
Damn, yeah.
just
So
and
you
and it was a
th
new actor too. I wonder if all of that had a
maybe,
role
oh,
yeah,
was it?
in the
I didn't even notice.
decision.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think Maskham has always kind of been, let's say, picked out to be the more fan
and
friendly,
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, of her warders, the guy that ends up surviving with the longer hair. He's had a lot of comedic relief
Yeah,
moments, so I'm
that's
sure
fair.
kind of that was the calculus behind that decision.
Mhm.
Alright, now that the kind of obvious way to cover the show is out of the way, we're gonna move now into what I have as the second bucket here, which is just kind of the squad reunited. So it's just everyone in the same room in Tarvalon kind of for the first time again. So we have Egwene being like, "Dang, we should have been there." We have, they're talking about the fact that Moraine's plan is to get them to go to Tyr so that Rand can get this Terangrial named Kalendor. And then Moraine kind of holds this meeting with the ducklings and is like, "Listen, fuckers, we're leaving tomorrow. I know you guys, there's probably about 18 hours of trouble you can get into. Don't get into 18 hours of trouble," which they obviously don't freaking listen to her. But I guess maybe the first question to lob out there that will get the conversation started is, how do we feel about seeing everyone on screen again together? And they're all together.
mhm. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. I mean, ear to ear, it's so good. I mean, I love our squad, every single one of them. We've had our ups and downs with a lot of them, but I think after last season, a lot of these characters have now come together in their own, and seeing them all just be so cheery and joyful with one another, you obviously know something bad's gonna come when times are like this. We get the squad together, are laughing and everything, but it's so good to see them, man. I think this is a great squad we have here, and I don't want anything to happen to them. I'm upset already that we already have to get
Mhm.
another break between them all, you know?
It's just nice, like you said, squad's back together. We find out it's been a month since the finale, which is super important. And then I love the Aiel as just like a culture. So getting to see all these Aiel men there, like that's just so cool. Like Avienda's back. Elaine, I know is your girl, Kyle. That we give you a piece to say about her. And then Loyal. I know I say Loyal because of the book, because of the audiobook, but they call him, what do they say? Loyal. How do they pronounce it in the
Loyal.
show? Loyal. I
Yeah.
freaking hate that. It's gonna be so hard for me to transition because 14 books of a lot of hours of audiobook kind of programs you to say things certain way.
Are you
But
saying
anyway,
Loyal is one of the most prevalent characters in the books?
I'm saying he's a beast, dude. He's the Hagrid of this story, man. Um, but something that I like that they're reinforcing right away is Matt's character with everything that's happened as a result of him blowing the horn of Lear. Because if you think about it, we're on book 3 of 14, and that is such a powerful magical item. You have to realize like how big of a moment that was back in season 2 when he did that. That I'm happy that they're focusing on it. It's like his main fixture. He literally gets painted in picture next scene with it as a joke, which was freaking hilarious. I thought he was cracking me up as a character this whole time, but he's dealing with being able to speak the old tongue and like actually like having all these weird memories. And I think it's coming across well. It's starting to cement this new actor as the Matt, because if you think about it, we got one season of one actor and then another season of the other. Now we're starting to finally have him cemented as the Matt, and his charisma and his comedy is coming across, and it did really well for me this whole episode. And then I'll save my conversation about the girls because we're about to break up, right?
Mm,
Like the guys go one
Yeah.
way, the girls go that. Do you? I guess I'll give you time to say your piece, Kyle, before we do that, because then we can really start talking about specifics.
I like the way that Rand, I don't want to say necessarily takes control, but he seems to be very aware of the situation at this point. I feel like season 2, he was kind of bumbling around a little bit. He was very naive about some things, especially regarding Lanfear, which, listen, I think we all understood that Celine was doing something for him, and we do not blame him for that.
I
But I
mean, I'm
think
still
I
there
just
from
liked,
him.
well, no, fair enough, but I just liked how this first scene we get for him, and he's like, "Listen, like, we're running from the Forsaken. Now we have the Black Aja." Like, he seems to be, I think, a lot more aware of the actual predicament he's in. We'll talk a lot more about that later. And then I can't leave the scene without talking about Perrin. I just like how they were just planting the seeds, especially again of his characterization. All right, so like I mentioned at the top of that last scene, we're kind of all splitting up after this. I love that Matt's like, "Come on, maybe one last hurrah with the boys." It was kind of like us this weekend at the casino. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And we're gonna follow the boys first. So this bucket I just have is the more casual of the two buckets here. This is just boys' day. So we have Rand, Matt, Perrin hitting the town. The maidens are following Rand, which he's not a big fan of. And then we actually just have the boys kind of hanging out and drinking. There's some conversations here that I think I want to talk about, but I also don't want to hog all of the air in the room. So I think we can just kind of chat. And then once we're done talking, I can clean up what I would like to say.
Mhm.
Mm. I think for me, my only comment on this was just, will Rand ever tell Perrin and Matt that he banged Lanfear? I mean, he tells them it was the innkeeper, but I don't know how important that will be, if they'll feel betrayed. Is like, how could you not tell us it was Lanfear a moment later on? But that's really kind of all I took away from here is that, and I just like the camaraderie again. Like you said, Kyle, we at the beginning of last season, Rand was completely lost. He was with Celine. He didn't really know what he was going, but in this episode, it really is shown how mature he is and how willing to, well, almost willing to accept that he is the Dragon Reborn. Obviously, he still kind of fights with Moraine on some things, but he does at the end of the day understand that he is the Dragon Reborn and he needs to do what he feels is right. And seeing him with his boys here is just always great. And Matt,
Mhm.
like Luke said earlier, also was just killing me, man, with just the arrogance and just so casually holding the horn of a leer just out in public. Just
Awesome.
it's great. And
I
I
do.
also like to touch that Perrin was shocked that Matt was the one to that blew the horn because obviously everyone around during the fight knew that the horn had been blown at some point, but it makes it just that more honorable for Matt that it was him, and gives him his
Mhm.
own little story here because we obviously know Perrin has the wolves, Rand's the dragon, Egwene and Nynaeve are set to do great things with the Aes Sedai. At least we're led to believe, and whatever. But great moments here.
Yeah, I don't think we laughed harder the whole episode than when Perrin and Matt collectively go, "Celine," like, when he says that. That was
Yeah.
so freaking funny, but also just throwing out there, I would play the hell out of whatever game they're playing on that table. That seems
Mhm.
fun to
Snakes and
play in a tab
foxes?
yeah, like, in a tavern, you're just getting hammered doing that, Matt's blowing the horn in the corner, like, that's just sounds like a great time. I don't have much to add, but this is the first seed plant that the group is gonna break up because Perrin kind of implies that he doesn't think he can follow with Rand. But
Mhm.
I'll leave it to you to bring up, like, specific quotes because I don't have anything else, like, super important written down for that.
No, I think at a high level, it just seems like my heart felt so full, maybe is the way to say it. I feel like they're just nailing the characterizations
Mhm,
of these 3 and their relationship. I think this is the best it's ever been on screen with the 3 of them. You know, season 1, we got, like, kind of early. We get them it's probably episode 1, I would assume. They're kind of in the tavern, and it didn't feel like this.
mhm,
This feels like the boys, like the bros, like, they're ribbing each other, they're drinking, but then
Mhm.
also like, Rand is dealing with the weight of being the Dragon Reborn. He feels comfortable kind of maybe feeling it around Perrin and Matt. We have Matt just gallivanting around, being a jackass. And then we have Perrin, who's, we know is introspective and he's kind of hinting, but not saying that he will just kind of wants to go home. And I just like that Perrin ends up saying, I don't know what the wheel will bring, but I know that you'll make the right choice.
Mhm.
And then I love how he also kind of compliments Matt in a way too, of that Matt is a great leader, even if he's an idiot. Like I would follow him, even if it ended, I'd end up at the bottom of a barrel of wine. Like he would convince me it was the right decision. I
Mhm.
just think they're doing a really great job of characterizing these 3. And my last comment too on this little bit will be jumping to the first thing with Rand and the maidens. Again, this is pulled straight out of the book. This is exactly like their relationship where they follow him around and he's like, please stop following me around. Like, I
yeah,
don't like it at all. And then Avienda, I think, does a good job just with the dialogue here of introducing this concept of Rand is obviously not an Aielman at heart. He is a wetlander. He's from the Two Rivers that he's very at odds with what their culture is. And well, obviously, we get to the end of this episode, and we're being told that that's going to be a big part of this season. So I just like the way that they're introducing it early on.
What do they
yeah,
call him again? It's the
Karo Khan.
is that just, like, also kinda, like, similar to what Dune is with the Lisan al-Gaib, just, like, a different
Yeah,
name for, like, the chosen one
Yep,
almost?
that'll work. Yep.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing that in the past 2 years, Dune 2 came out, which is great. Okay.
Yeah, we've
10
obsessed
out of
over
10.
that.
Read the Dune books too, yeah.
All right, yeah, that's all I had there. Oh, also Matt's old tongue when he slips into the old tongue, and it's may we all find the comfort of 1,000 ginger girls. I thought that was hilarious. The fact that he knows how to say that in old tongue is so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a little more meaty part of the boys branching off into their day of gallivanting storyline, essentially. So this is what I was calling Rand contemplates next steps bucket. So there's 3 scenes rather that make up this bucket. The first is just a smaller one that's Rand and Loyal. They're kind of reading through this part of the Carithion cycle, which we talked about in past seasons that we know is the prophecies of the dragon. We then have Elaine and Rand having a quick conversation. Then we have Moraine and Rand having a conversation. We can really talk about this in any order we want. I have a lot of things written down. I'll try not to say all of them, but obviously want to give you both the floor.
Yeah, let me cover some bases and then you correct my lore because this was just amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
did I do that? Or did you
Yeah, you did somehow.
Um, this was amazing because and Dave, I don't even know without subtitles or really having the context of like the different areas of the map, how much you picked up on this. But just to clarify, Loyal says to Rand that the stone of Tyr will never fall until the dragon leads his people there. And whoever conquers the stone becomes the king of Tyr, I think is kind of like what the prophecy is. And so Tyr being the country and the stone of Tyr being is that just the name of the castle in Tyr? Or is that
Yeah.
literally the name? Okay, yeah. So that's just like a
Okay.
broad stroke in the prophecy cycle that the dragon needs to check that off his list at some point is what Loyal's saying, right? And then we find out later, and this term got thrown around a bunch of times. I was kind of looking at you and Alki, see how much you were picking up on it, but they talk about Calendar. I
Yes, I
don't
have it
know.
written down. I don't know how to
Okay,
spell it, but I have it I have it written down.
so one of my
So
Big
favorite
question
lines.
here.
Yeah,
Big
go ahead.
question verse. Are you starting with a C or a K?
see.
Yeah, he's right.
Was it? I have
Learning.
I have Calindor. I just heard Cal indoor is what I heard it as.
It's just it's Excalibur, right? Like, it's so Excalibur that they go on to say that basically Lews Therin put the sword in the Stone of Tyr, and nobody's been able to remove it in thousands of years. So it's waiting there for the prophecy to almost be fulfilled by, theoretically, the next dragon reborn. So that's, like, the main purpose of Tears of Country, which is why I'm curious about your opinion on the end of the episode when Rand decides to, you know, swerve left and decide to skip out on Tyr. But we could talk about that a little bit later. I just wanted to clear that up because have those pieces in your mind of the difference between Tyr, the Stone of Tyr, and then just Kalendor itself, because that's going to be something that's constantly brought up.
It's great that you mentioned that because I literally have the words Excalibur written down here because so Rand explains to or Loyal explains to Rand that the Stone of Tyr is needed, which I couldn't hear at first if he was saying sword or stone. So in my head, I was already kind of associating, okay, there's a sword at Tyr that whoever pulls it, like Excalibur, will become the ruler of Tyr. And then obviously later on, we'll get to it. Lanfear brings up the idea that if you know, Rand had Kalendor during his fight with Ishmael, it might have been even more one sided
Mhm.
rather than him kind of struggling. So I had the idea of Kalendor and then I just wasn't sure, but I'm glad you brought that up because that definitely helped me out. Was feeling Excalibur. I just didn't know if I was just kind of crazy or because I just knew the story of Excalibur that I was trying to force its way here. But
Mhm.
yeah, I guess we'll save the comments on Rand swerving and going to Aiel later because I do have some thoughts on that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think to add some additional context too to the geography and connecting us to season 1, so I'm not sure if you remember, but, one of the cold opens of season 1, we're gonna throw a shot in the dark and say it was episode 6. Just Swan's backstory, I'm not sure if you remember that, when she's a little girl in the boat with her dad.
Mhm.
They show the Stone of Tyr in the background. She's from Tyr, so she was in, like, the country
Oh,
of
okay,
Tyr at
cool.
that moment.
Okay,
Mhm.
So you see it, like, all the way off in the distance.
that's cool.
It's just this huge stone dome that's in the background there. So we've
Okay.
technically been there, but obviously a little difficult to remember. And this show is famous. This series is famous for throwing a tons of names,
Mhm.
places, buildings, all of that stuff at you.
And
So
just reiterate it one
that's what
more
Luke and I
time.
are here
This
for.
when they say Stone of Tyr, that is meaning the
It's a
fortress
fortress.
itself. Okay.
Yes, yeah. Loyal, I think, even uses the word it's impregnable. It's like the most famous castle fortress in Randland, in
Well,
the continent, in
well, I
where
was gonna
we
say,
are.
what about the one that was fighting off the blight in season 1? Is that a fortress too?
Yeah, yeah, Faldara. The Stone of Tyr is, I would say, more famous than that.
Oh,
And
really? Okay.
think Feldara is as northeast as you can go in this country,
Mhm.
and the Tyr is as southeast you can kinda go. It's that
Yeah,
area.
you could almost probably run a straight line from Faldara all the way down to Tyr.
Yeah.
Good to
Yeah.
know. Perfect.
So I
Yes.
guess I
Okay.
guess, yeah, if you have more from those specific scenes, I was gonna loop this all in because we kinda talked about the calendar part with, like, Moraine talks to him about it too, right? When
Yeah.
when
Mhm.
she's telling Rand, like, "You have to go there," and, of course, Rand's natural reaction is say, "Well, if you want me to go there, I don't wanna go there anymore." So it's like that kind of relationship that they have. It's not just with her, it's with all Aes Sedai, and that kinda is like a theme for him, but she is the one that's saying, like, "Yo, that's part of that's, like, part of your next steps." And that I guess it really gets more explored with the Lanfear part, but I'll give it over to you, Kyle. What else do you wanna bring up from that before the
Yeah, I was
Lanfear?
gonna say too that, the part with Moraine, he's again going into another part of the Carithion cycle. He's talking about another prophecy. He's just saying on the slopes of Dragon Mount, as he looks at the mountain, as we recall, probably the most famous cold opening in the series at this point. I think it's what season 1, episode 7, episode 8 is Rand's mom, the ginger
Oh,
woman
7,
Aiel.
baby.
At 7,
7.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that is literally that part of the prophecy is him being born on the slopes of Dragon Mount. Born of a maiden wedded to no man, he will be of the ancient blood and raised by the old blood. So we've kind of checked that part of all of the prophecies off. We've also checked off at this point the season 2 finale is when he battles Ashamiel and Moraine puts the dragon banner across the sky. That part of it is above the watchers, over the waves shall he proclaim himself, bannered across the sky in fire. That's literally the exact reason why Moraine did it. So we're literally it becomes essentially the prophecies become a checklist. That is why Rand is reading them with Loyal because he's like, okay, I need to know what I need to do essentially. So he is just kind of learn all of these prophecies to just kind of give him some level of direction of like, where the hell do I go next? What the heck do I do? And that's something that will become a big part, I think, of this season of his character.
And just while you brought that all up, that totally triggered the moment in me where that's one of the biggest complaints of the season 2 finale is the forced prophecy that Moraine does, right? She makes that dragon there. But did you see, I'm sure you did, Kyle. You saw the picture of what the
Yeah.
actual end of the book is, where you quickly see Rand fighting Ishmael in the sky being projected. That's what happens in the book. And that's why it's so much better in the book, because it's not a forced prophecy that Moraine just uses her powers for. It actually naturally happened, which made it so much cooler. And that's all I'll say on it, because I don't feel the
All
need
right, I'm
to
just gonna
compare it to the
squeeze in
books.
my thoughts here about again about this prophecy since we're talking about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, the way that Moraine is just forcing him to go through these like a checklist, I'm not a fan of like these forced prophecies. Like it feels like she is forcing him to fulfill the prophecies rather than him just naturally coming across them. So I'm not a fan of her character feeling like she needs to make these prophecies come true versus them just naturally happening and Rand accomplishing them on the way. It's something maybe I'm just not used to seeing, like a prophecy becoming a checklist for somebody. It is
But
weird,
that's why he
and that was
swerves
probably
at the end, right? To go against what Moraine wants.
yes, and I while I but I do s which is great because I think eventually he will get to Tyr, and I think he will obviously draw a Calendar, but it didn't need to be, like, right now, you know? I don't like, Moraine holding his hand to do all this, I just think these checklists will just naturally occur, you know? So, that's probably been my one complaint so far of maybe the show as a whole even is just Moraine forcing these prophecies rather than just occur, but
I will say that Rand is going to do that same thing. Like, that is why him and Loyal are literally reading that book, so because he
yeah,
wants to
it's weird.
know, he doesn't wanna fumble in the dark anymore, he wants to understand, and I think that's a beautiful thing about the series is that Rand and Moraine have this intention to them that he is the Dragon Reborn, he has things he has to do on the way to the final battle, and along the way like, some of the things just happen. Some of
Mhm,
them happen in ways where it's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that." Some of it's, like, dumb luck, some of it is very purposeful, it's just kind of a mismatch of all of it, and it's just fun, the journey along the way of he doesn't really have a choice at the end of the day to hit all of the boxes because that's literally the way the Wheel of Time and the pattern and such works, but it's
mhm,
just funny the difference of checking each of them off along the way.
Mhm.
yeah.
And also, this is very true to Moraine's character. This is exactly what she's like. She is just driven. She's on this mission. She has sold out her entire life for Rand to succeed. So naturally, she's going to have some opinions about how he does that. And I like the way that it's kind of antagonistic a little bit. Rand is kind of again, he's being a little naive, although I said literally what 15 minutes ago that I liked that he was like taking control of the situation earlier. But when he looks at her and says, "You don't tell me what to do anymore," and then like the music kind of drops in the background, and I was like, "Sheesh, I like it. I like it." Okay. I think we can move on for the most part from this. I just want to give a shout out to Elaine because we kind of talked around that scene. She
Mhm,
sends, I guess just to kind of talk through it, is that she sent word to a noblewoman in Tyr to kind of set them up, butter up Tyr for Rand's arrival, just to make things easier for her friend. I just like the way that she's kind of a confidant for him in this way. I think she has a very empathetic look at him. She's trying to explain to him kind of what it means to have power. I like that having power means accepting that any decision which helps some will hurt others. That's the truth of ruling nations, that and who to trust. And she like believes in him and wants him to be great, even if he doesn't believe in himself. And I just really like this characterization of Elaine and the kind of the chemistry they have as characters.
She's gonna be
yeah.
like the political part of this, which is good because she's obviously the heir. But we also have like this quick scene. I don't even think we need to talk about it. I just want to mention it when she does send two other letters out to Queen Morgase and I think another one to Tyr, or
That was
maybe
the
that
one.
was it. And then she has a
Yeah.
conversation with him about like the political part of things. But
Mhm.
yeah, that covers it. Yeah. So
Yeah. All right. So that's going to move us now. We're going to shift over to the ladies. So the first part of this kind of ladies bucket is going to be just the girls having a chat. So it's one scene being Egwene talking about how things are different with Rand. It's really emotional and mental impacts of last season, which obviously played a big role there. And the second part of this is going to be Swan interrupting and kind of talking to the girls about what they need to do. Maybe not a ton here to talk about, but obviously just want to give people the opportunity.
Mhm.
I think the relationship between Egwene and Swan is very interesting. How Egwene really is she is just not a fan of Swan at all. She obviously knows what she put ran through in the last season and does not view as Swan as an ally, which hopefully that mindset changes because I think they both could benefit from one another. Obviously, Swan, after having a lot of her sisters leave to become Black Ajas, Egwene needs to fill one of those roles, and Egwene also would really benefit from the knowledge and experience of Swan. And I think it's an interesting dynamic that they both hate each other right now. I don't foresee that lasting, the entire series if either of them make it. Well, I'll say if Swan makes it that far, rather. I know Egwene's gone the distance. Well, I'd like to think. Um, but yeah, I think it's interesting that because we know Egwene is obviously set up to have a lot of immense power or dormant power, and Swan kind of also can relate to her in that sense, having been, from a poorer area, not being really too aware of her powers either. So I think these two will have
Mhm.
a glowing up soon.
And she mentioned it for the first time this episode here, but this is going to be a very super common part of Egwene's character going forward. But the best way to say it is she just has insane PTSD from being a slave to the Sean Chen and being tortured and constantly hurt. So, like, just keep that in the back of your mind because I think that's the quickest way we'll be able to say it for us all to be talking about the same type of things here. But the Swan part of it all, when she comes in, she does have this edge to her where she's not softened up to Rand like Moraine is a little bit because Moraine is eavesdropping on this piece. And Swan is saying, like, the dragon is going to go insane. You guys have to be ready to deal with the inevitable madness. So she's trying to prep them to be emotionless when it comes to decisions about Rand. And that's going to play out in a fun way of how they take that. And then the last thing she does say is while the girls are like prepping, like, we're going to leave soon because Moraine gave them the 24-hour timeline before they all leave the city. What she does say is that if they leave before their sisters, they're never going to be allowed back to the tower. So that's something that gets dealt with in the next scene that we're probably going to talk about. But Kyle, before we get there, anything that we missed?
No, I will say, Dave, I think that I wanna maybe point out that I think the Swan-Egwene relationship, I think it only has a distrust maybe to the level of hatred flowing in one direction, which is Egwene to Swan. I don't think
Yeah, yeah,
Swan
no,
feels
no,
that
yeah,
way, yeah, at all towards
no.
Egwene. I think Swan understands the importance of Nynaeve rather, and Egwene, she even says that, the board of all of this stuff has changed, like, "We need both of you to be strong, and you need us, as in the White Tower, as in the Aes Sedai, to be strong. So this relationship is mutually beneficial, essentially, is what she's trying to explain to her. Egwene is very hard headed, so she's kind of not hearing it a ton. She just wants to basically become accepted so that she can leave. And my last comment just here is I love the quote that Swan has where she just says, and you'll have to watch him go mad. Watch your love splinter and rot because of a cruel turn of the wheel. And it just kind of highlights how little kind of choice a lot of these people have in what's going on. I mean, Rand has no choice. He's the Dragon Reborn. Egwene has no choice about Rand being the Dragon Reborn. She has no choice about the power she has. And they have this level of responsibility because of the power that they've been given. And that's just a fun part of the story. Fun for us, obviously not
Mhm.
fun for them. It kind of stinks for them. Okay. So the next bucket we have here is Egwene's accepted test. I have this kind of as the Egwene part of it all, which is the meat of the test and all that stuff. Then there's a Nynaeve aspect of it where she has conversations with Lan. And then the smallest aspect is Elaine, just unbelievably small thing there that we actually might not even have to talk about. But I think we really just tackle all of the Egwene stuff. It's just her going through the arches, we saw Nynaeve do it in season 2, and they hoodwinked us, the little bastards, in season 2, where we got that 3rd test being kinda long. I am a fan of them only giving us a little bit of Egwene's. I don't think we needed to do all 3.
Mhm.
Hold my hand when I say this. That was the best scene in the entire show, and I don't even care, man. There is nothing that compared to that, and I really truly cannot expand on this But just know that that scene has kept me up the last night. I've been thinking about it, putting it on repeat. That scene with Ram with the long hair, what that is, I don't even God, it was the best thing that the show ever did. And I can't even I'm getting chills thinking about it right now. Like I cannot tell you how much I loved that scene. I loved the acting from Rand here. I thought that the girl, like you don't know how distant in the future this is trying to say it might be, like if that's a possible future, if we're going to get parts of it, if we're going to get the whole thing, who knows? But just know that the acting just gives me so much hope. And like the path that we're going forward towards the end of this series is, I am just telling you right now, we're going to look back on that scene and it was 100 out of 10. I fucking loved every second of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Dave,
no.
well, I mean, your boy, he was, I think, number 2 on your list, coming out of season 2. He's got all this long hair, and Nynaeve says he just killed Matt and Perrin, like, goddamn.
Yeah, I mean, I always like the dark and twisted futures. I mean, it's funny that we have all these things going on in this show as well as the time where they were covering Invincible because Invincible's kind of going through some same shit in his own show as well, you know, with and the quote that Elaine tells Rand is very similar to or something that Mark Grayson would like to hear in Invincible. So just a lot of comparisons there and they're also diving into the future a little bit as well and these alternate future iterations of what could be. You know, obviously, I'm of the mindset that things can change. You know, Rand doesn't have to end up that way. That could definitely be one of the more negative outcomes. Luke, obviously, knowing a little bit more, can appreciate that scene. I just took it for what it was. It's just a possible future into what Rand could be. We do see him a little jumping the gun a little bit here in later on with the powers and seeing a little bit of what that madness can look like. And obviously, there is a very prevalent outcome in which this does happen because I mean we saw it in this dream or rather future vision and then as well as Swan telling the girls like hey
Whoa.
Well,
Rand could be in some trouble so just good scene though I like the long hair for sure on him
yeah. You kind of lagged her a little bit. Talk real quick.
talking
Okay, you're back.
talking
Um,
talking wait how does
okay,
this
we're good. We got most of that. I
Yep.
might have missed a word or not, or something, but
Okay.
yeah
you
let's
want
go
to jump in, Kyle?
That's pretty much a perfect segue into what I was gonna end up saying is that I think it was kind of obvious that this was the what will be. So we learned in season 2, you get 3 tests. First one is what was, second one is what is, third one is what will be. It was kinda crazy to think that this is if this was the what will be, and then she came out after it and she was covered in blood, so
was
what
Nynaeve
did
the
she
same
do to
way
Rand?
I
Huh?
feel like Nynaeve came out
Yeah.
of the future completely soaked in blood too
Yeah, her thing was that big battle with all of the Trollocs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, did Egwene just kinda challenge him to hand combat, and they were rolling around on the riverbed, and she took him down? It's just funny that she came out covered in
and
blood, which
I
I
thought
assume
the
was Rand's.
And I thought the word choice was actually really interesting that Rand said. He's because at the beginning of it all, he says, you know, you can finally do what you were supposed to do all these years ago. And when he said that in my head was, you're talking about getting gentled, like, oh, you should have gentled me years ago. But instead, he flips it to play more into the psychotic part of him and says, you should have bowed to me all those years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
interesting choice of
Bow
words
to
because
me. Oh my
yeah,
god,
it
it was
was
so good.
interesting because I really thought he was gonna come off with saying, "You should have gentled me," like, "Oh, I regret being the dragon. I regret killing Matt and Perrin. I regret having the power. You should have gentled me like Swan wanted you to do all those years ago." But no, he's just like, "No, you should have bowed to me. I'm just the guy. I'm
Mm-hmm.
that guy."
He
It
says, "Yeah,
is
you got what
interesting.
you." Yeah, go ahead.
Good.
Just saying, he was getting like going through like a manic episode, and he's saying like, "You got what you wanted. Like they're all dead. Blah blah blah. Like bow to me." And he like turns around. I think he says the words like the Amerlin seat, right? Like
Yeah,
talking
you have
to.
the Amundsen. She also we do also see that, which I thought was the coolest part of it all, was that we do
Yeah.
find out that because I think in past podcasts I had either Paul or I had suggested that maybe Nynaeve would be the Amelin seat. There were obviously chances that Egwene could become it, but I think I was more leaning on Nynaeve since we've seen her have the most power at this point. So it was cool seeing Egwene get her flowers there and what she wanted probably.
Mhm. Yeah.
You actually had the theory of Egwene will potentially become the Amyrlin seat.
Oh my
Paul
I'm a fucking genius, man. Do I even need to
Paul
continue doing this podcast?
Mhm.
Paul was of a mind that Elaine would be the Amerlin, and then Egwene would be her keeper of the
We don't even
Chronicles, so
need Paul. Get Paul out of here and his wacky
she'd have
theories.
the
This
staff.
guy sucks.
And a step further is that Paul thought that Elaine would be the Amerlin after Leandrin got a turn on the Amerlin
Oh
seat,
my
so
god.
I think that
Get him
part
out.
Yeah.
is kinda dead at this
Get him
point,
out.
although
I
maybe you
basically
never
know
know.
how the Wheel of Time's gonna end at this point, you know? I got all the
Oh,
deets.
yeah.
Mhm.
I bet. I
So,
bet.
like, how badass that scene was aside, just, like, the implications of it all, Egwene, I think you said, right, Kyle, I had her in my top 4. I've always been an Egwene fan, but her reaction when she walks out of the arches, she's just like, "Alright, give me the ring, I'm leaving." Boom. Like, that alone was also, like, its own level of badassery because she didn't even react like Nynaeve did, where Nynaeve was, like, paralyzed from all the emotional trauma she just went through. So I just feel like so many points to Egwene for trucking through that, and also like whatever the implications, however that's going to mess with her head with her relationship with Rand is it plays out a little bit later here,
Mhm.
but that's just there's just so many layers here, and it's going to have such high rewatch value if we get to where we need to go. Character development of the Wheel of Time as a series is just one of the best things about it, and like the journeys they go through, the fact that you can get glimpses of potential futures or things that they're trying to change themselves from going into, it's just amazing. And like that's why I love this scene so much. Plus, like Rand Althor is one of my top 3 favorite fantasy characters of all time. And just I know what's in store for him. And there's just Rand is amazing. And like I love the long red hair. It's just that's what he has on a lot of the covers, I think, of the books itself. So it's cool that he can pull that off and look beautiful the entire time.
Yeah, I think it did a good job, her actions after the test, of highlighting one of, Egwene's defining and probably most positive character traits is just how ambitious and, I think, determined that she is as a person, as a channeler, as an Aes Sedai, and all of this stuff, and I think it was a really good way to show that. It did seem whack about, like, the level of disrespect she could just toss at the Amerlin seat, and then we have Lyanna, who is the keeper. It doesn't really say or do anything. And then the other Aes Sedai that's with them is Alviarin. She's a white sister. She is just a big character in the book, so it's nice we got her name drop. We'll be seeing her as the story progresses. So it was nice they kind of threw her, let's say, that bone of being in that scene.
What's the
I'd
white
be
Aja
curious.
off the top of your head? Is that politics or is
I
that
should know that,
gray?
shouldn't I? See,
One's
that's the
one's
one
knowledge,
question
or
that
I
I
feel like
should
one
have
or
known.
no, Brown's knowledge, okay, I'll give you
Gray,
that.
I think, is
Politics?
Gray is politics. White, I think, is, like, more nebulous, maybe, like, wisdom.
Something
Yeah.
like that, that sounds right.
Okay, it's devoted themselves to the questions of philosophy and truth,
Okay.
which is interesting. So that's the whites. Okay, so I think now we can jump kind of into the Nynaeve and Lan part of this. So as Egwene's in the test, Lan and Nynaeve have 2 scenes here. The first one is Lan asking her about her own test, and then the second one is him showing her his family, his Malkieri power-wrought sword. I think these scenes really highlight a lot of differences between Bookland and Showland, in my mind, maybe for the positive, but Dave as Lan's son, how do you think daddy did?
Daddy crushed it, man. I'm excited to see the new sword in action. Not too much to comment, at least on Nynaeve and Lan's relationship as a whole. I root for them. I think they're both really awesome characters. Well, at least definitely Lan. Nynaeve is still working her way up for me. She's still too timid, and I think once she gets more control over power, I think I'll really enjoy Nynaeve a little bit more. But right now, I'm in that like frustration phase with Nynaeve. But overall, I think they both deserve happiness. I think they're a really good couple, and especially later on, if we have an aged Lan who's just a experienced battle-worn sword master, and then Nynaeve, who is also just, one of the strongest Aes Sedai ever. I think that's just a power couple I can get behind.
Mhm.
But I do expect the sword to get in some use. He does claim that it's gonna take the life of a Forsaken, so I'm just curious to think of, like, which one is gonna be getting killed from that sword. So
So there is something we need to talk about in relation to the Forsaken. If you have anything you wanna add for that scene, Kyle, throw it out now because I just wanna quickly cover the Lanfear piece, and then we could probably go to the Knight.
Yeah, I guess my piece on the Nynaeve and Lan of it all is that it feels like show Lan is a lot more, I think, maybe emotionally intelligent is the right way to say it. He seems a lot more open and expressive about the way he feels about Nynaeve. I think in the books, it's very hard, like, I'm a man on a mission. I'm a lone wolf. Like, I fight evil kind of guy. And he's like, doesn't know how to square his feelings with Nynaeve. And I think here he leans into them a lot more. I mean, the fact that she is kind of saying about her test, like, "We abandoned lives that we truly wanted," and then he says to her, "Are you doing that again right now, like, by staying with Rand and following him around?" And I was like, "Damn, that's pretty emotionally intelligent of him to say." He sounds almost like a therapist at this point, so I just seemed a little bit different than his book counterpart. I would say not for the better or the worse, it's just an interesting characterization of him. And then, again, when he's saying, like, "I've never felt worthy, I am no king," that felt, I think, more like Bookland, but I just wanted to give a
Definitely.
shout out to his emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get to the night when they start taking shots and, everybody's partying, the last thing that we gotta cover is the conversation that Moraine and Lan have while they're sitting in the town, and of course, dude, I just have to gush for a second anytime Lanfear's on screen. It was just so cool when you could just feel her power. She's walking through the city and they look at her and then they turn around, she like is teleports right behind him, just badass. But there are some things that are important here. They re-emphasize, she specifically re-emphasizes that Lanfear that is that, like, they need to get Kalendor for Rand. Like, she doesn't want Rand to die. Like, she loves Rand. We learned that from season 2 that that Ishii and Lanfear are the only Forsaken that actually cared for Lews Therin, who was just the last dragon. So they're the only ones that are these powerful Dark One generals that don't necessarily have every motivation in the world to kill the dragon. So that's important. She's even willing to work with Moraine here. And this is where the whole plan for this night gets set up off screen. But the thing that gets said that's pretty important is Lanfear says, the thing I respect about you, Moraine, is that you're willing to use anything to get the job done. And that's awesome because I didn't even think about how they were going to connect that to the end, but we can talk about that a little bit later. But just remind me, Kyle, is there 8 Forsaken in the show? Is that the number or is it 7?
I believe they've confirmed 8.
So 8 including Ishii and Lanfear. So meaning Ishii released the 6 other seals at the end of season
Mhm.
2 when he broke them all. Okay, very important to just have that number in your head, Dave, because they're the generals. Like, you need to know exactly how many there are and then when you can start predicting who the other, Forsaken are. But my 2 favorite things about the Wheel of Time, Rand al'Thor, the Forsaken. That's it. So,
And I think that this scene with the Lanfear and Moraine and Lan conversation really highlights the creative decision that they've made to give the Forsaken, I think, a larger, even larger
oh
role
yeah,
in the show and in the events that happen. I think it's understood in the books that there's a lot going on in the background with them that happens off screen. We get some prologues where, like, we're spying on their conversations and stuff, and I'm just hoping that the show is even more explicit about that stuff because I completely agree with you. I
those
loved
prologues are the best part too of the books.
They're
Like, they're
so good.
just crack. Yeah.
I loved the line read of, "You didn't even embrace the sword." Like,
Mhm.
she's just kind of fucking with her, like, it's just it was so good. I'm so glad that they had this interaction. I
Lizzie.
will say, one
Sorry.
thing that we did skip over that kind of maybe preceded actually, maybe it's hard to tell sometimes, but maybe directly preceded this actual conversation with Lanfear is that Moraine and Varen just have a very quick conversation about Rand. Again, I think it's almost I don't wanna say the other side of the coin maybe of this Lanfear thing, where Varen's kinda warning Moraine a little bit, like, "You think that you have this control over Rand and you can guide him to do things, but you don't actually know him. Like, you believe in the idea of the Dragon Reborn, but do you believe in Rand al'Thor himself? Because he is a person. He is the Dragon Reborn." And I just think I enjoyed that kind of warning shot almost from Varen. Obviously, she's has the perspective of she grew up with Naomi. She watched Naomi rather grow up and betray her and almost kill her sister. So I just wanted to give that a shout out because Varen, I
Mhm.
think, plays a fantastic role in the show and the books, and it's just
I
always
think
nice to talk about her.
she's her and Moraine are probably my 2 favorite Aes Sedai, I think, in the books. So, just I will gush when Varen has scenes, and you're right, I would definitely miss that one, but
Yeah.
And
Just
the
never
other
get to
thing,
say that.
I guess, going back a little bit, it also seemed like Varen's. I don't know if I'm cutting in here, but Varen's sister that she was with
Mhm.
also apparently lost her memory from whatever the Red
she
Aja
got
did to her.
yeah, they, like, use the power to mess with her head, right?
The Black Aja, but yeah, which I don't they didn't explain it at all, but she has, like, that little bit of light that kinda flies through her brain, and it seemed that Varen maybe defended against it while her sister,
I couldn't
Adeleas.
tell in the moment
Mhm.
if Varen defended it or not. I honestly, it was so quick, I couldn't tell, but we do see that she obviously did.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think this is probably one of my biggest gripes with the episode. The logistics of it is that Moraine says, "I have no intention of letting him near the Aes Sedai." Why are we in Tarvalon?
I don't know.
Why are we at Aes Sedai home base? We clearly made a decision to come here. I just didn't understand
Well,
that
it's
part of it,
technically
but
kinda like the biggest city south of oh, no, no, I'm thinking of season 1
now
finale. No, you're
yeah,
totally right.
Egwene
They
even
took a
says,
boat
"We're
all the way
halfway across." Yeah, we're
yeah,
halfway across the
yeah.
world from Falm, so I just thought that was slightly
Yeah, that is
interesting. Is
weird.
that I mean, is that a thought she has based on the Black Aja stuff? Probably not, because we know Sawan is also kind of anti-Rand a little bit, so I just thought that was kind of funny and interesting. And
Yeah.
we're gonna call balls and strikes here. We're gonna call balls and strikes. Okay, you wanna talk about a fucking strike though, the nighttime.
Yes.
So, I wanna talk about, I think, the pregame stuff just very first, because I think there's some things we wanna talk about before we get into the chaos of it all.
Mhm,
Luke mentioned they're taking shots. We didn't actually mention it, but we know that Elaine got some apples to make some liquor, because, as we remember from season 2, that's one of the ways she's learned how to use the one power when she was by herself, is that she speeds up fermentation and she
mhm.
makes liquor. And everyone's feeling it, everyone's loving it, and we even get Matt getting a kiss, playing a little maiden's kiss. This was a great callback to the show. So,
He's not really good at the game though, unfortunately.
now he was bleeding like he stuck big.
Yeah.
I think the big thing, Luke, I'm curious to see what your take is here, is that, the biggest shocker of the episode, I think maybe for show only people and book readers, is the fact that we pretty much get confirmation that Aviendha and Elaine are banging.
Dude,
Mhm.
the line read of "finally" was like, "Where did that come from?" But I don't
Yeah.
hate any of it at all. I think it's awesome. It's I think it's great, especially because, like, the more we get Elaine, the better, in my opinion, because she's a very important character, and having her establish more roots with other characters is just great. I think it's just gonna go a long way. I think Avienda needs a little bit more screen time. I don't think she got enough this episode, but this was her moment, and this is awesome that, I'm Twitter of time loves this, I'm sure. Like, it is probably one of the best things so I liked everything about it, and I know Dave had a pretty good reaction to this when we were watching it, thought the kiss was good, and
Yeah, I
what are
mean,
your thoughts in general? Yeah.
when they had their first interaction in the episode, I was feeling the sexual tension just oozing
Yeah.
into the camera. I was like, "Okay, I didn't see this coming, but I'm all here for it." I love, like I said earlier with Len and Nynaeve, we love powerful couples, and an Aiel, uh, fighter, as well as Elaine, who is, the heir and obviously very capable, coming to be a very capable Aes Sedai. Definitely rooting for these 2 for sure, and I like how, when we first got introduced to Elaine, there was a question about the red hair and, oh, is she an Aiel? And it's kind of, like a recurring question now whenever we see red hair. But I always like how they address it, that, she is not an Aiel woman, but she kind of plays into it. And even Avienda is like, oh, you're learning a little like when she does the hand gestures for being a
Yeah.
wetlander or whatever. And, I think that's really cute. And I do like it. I think they're gonna be a good couple.
It is interesting too, in that I think they played a little bit of a balance of a risk, let's say, of the Elaine and the Aiel thing, because I think the crux of it really is that she just is, let's say, a worldly person, and that she's the daughter of Arab Andor, so she's supposed to know about all of these cultures. So that's how she knows about the Aiel so
Mhm.
much. I'm glad that you kind of also maybe picked up on it that way, Dave, more than leaning into, like, she actually is, like, hidden Aiel. I just think maybe that was potential risks that they ran. And I will say my initial reaction to this was a little bit like, "No," but as on some self-reflection, I think that is just coming at pure 100% jealousy because you know what? Fair enough. Like, good for the girls, the gays, the lesbians out there. They deserve this. I'm just upset that it's not me, let's say. So because these 2 are written very, very, very close in the books, and it's a relationship that develops over time, but I
People
can
probably ship them all
appreciate
the time in the fandom of
yeah,
the book, and yeah.
I can appreciate the idea that the show is trying to make a lot of the relationships more mature and, like, developed than, like, having to read between the lines a lot. We've experienced that with Nynaeve and Lan of how it's moving very fast, and they're obviously clearly just, like, super duper in love, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Mhm. Right.
And now we got, I guess, move into some people that are not moving so fast and not doing so well on the romantic side. Just very quick, Rand and Egwene have this conversation about her test. She kind of tells him that he wasn't exactly there and talk about read between the lines. He understands exactly what she means and that he was in the tests as his madness, as his mad dragon self.
Mhm.
And this is again, Luke, like you mentioned, we're getting that reinforcement of the PTSD memories.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about 3 things happening here simultaneously, like, we have the Rand and Egwene stuff, we have the Nynaeve and Matt stuff, and then we have the Perrin and Loyal stuff. So, we gotta just talk
I think we
about them
just
in
do,
sequential order. I mean, we can really just talk about it all, right?
yeah. I mean, do you want to just do Rand and Egwene since we just talked about them?
Yeah, in just the fight too, right? Because
Yeah.
this visually to me was awesome, and granted, like, book readers, this is so out of order of, like, what's actually happening here and when this is happening, but this is damn near close to what happens in a vacuum of, like, 2 Rand, like, when this all goes down, right? Where the mirror entities are coming out. I thought it was awesome, and then as soon as Egwene figures it out and she just freaking and then she says, like, the mirrors," and he explodes, and Dave touched on it earlier, and Alki was even saying that it's so cool visually how the male power looks with the taint kind of flowing through the fiery crazy power of the male side of the one power. So it's just it was very visually pleasing, and I hope that they keep leaning into the coloring idea of things, just because it's both telling a story visually and it's the consistency of it. I love it. I think it looks so badass. But yeah, the like Rand was had some moves too. Like he was dodging, flip, like he had some freaking moves. Like he can fight. So I thought it was really cool. Dave, how did you think? How'd that go down for you?
I was going through a roller coaster, honestly, because at first I wasn't too sure who was responsible for it. Obviously, I thought at first it was maybe a Forsaken, but then I was kind of thinking of how Egwene was just having those really vivid dreams of Rena, and I wasn't sure if we were in a situation where Egwene is causing this to happen in her sleep, but then we also see, things going on with Perrin and the axe. So I wasn't too sure of honestly who was responsible for this. I just am seeing Egwene getting shanked a couple times and I'm
Oh
freaking
my
out
god,
here.
yeah.
And I honestly, I had no idea what to think of it at first, but it was such a cool scene. Like you said, how Rand explodes with his magic after they figure out that they're coming through the mirrors. Looked really cool. I didn't think it was, I guess, Lanfear, or I didn't want it to think it was Lanfear. Moraine, I was sitting there, we were watching Luke and I with Alki as well, and I wanted to say, "Why is Moraine just sitting there? Why is she
Mhm.
not actively?" And then it kind of hit me that, okay, she is definitely in cahoots with what's going on. It sucks that I because it's goes into what you were saying, Kyle, with the whole Varen conversation of I hated to see Moraine act this way in terms of working with the Forsaken to get Rand to do what he wants. But wow, what an incredible little scene we get here. And I mean, we haven't even talked about the Nynaeve part of this whole thing yet. And so I'll save that for that introduction. But the I love seeing Rand in action, man. I think the weaves look great.
Was
Yeah.
there any part of you that thought we were getting another "it's still the 3rd test"?
No, I didn't think so. I,
Okay.
I actually I was well past that. I really did. I was
Good.
definitely on the side of okay, this has got to be Egwene doing this in her sleep.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And my only comment is that this is not going to be good for whatever relationship issues they're having because it's
Yeah.
literally him choking her and stabbing her. I don't
Mhm.
think that's the way to cure this resistance to intimacy she has
Right.
with him. So I guess something to look out for. The next one we can jump to here is just Perrin and Loyal, because this one I think is a little bit less to analyze beyond the fact that Perrin and fucking Loyal are beasts. Perrin
Yeah.
takes an axe to the chest, to the hand. Loyal's throwing that thing around. He's catching it. He's busting it into the floor. I mean, I
Mhm.
think they held their own pretty well against this murderous axe.
Mhm.
Makes sense it was an axe too, that's just Perrin's identity is always, like, axe related, so
Yeah,
I
and
also think
one
they
go
also
ahead.
gave us the herring in terms of Matt also just I also wasn't sure if it was Matt causing the whole thing because he's having these hallucination of the cards and
Mhm.
all these things are happening around him and he's not reacting to him. So it's I couldn't decide between Egwene or Matt, honestly, in this moment here.
And just to summarize what's going on with Matt and Nynaeve, because that's probably the more important piece, but it's also pretty simple. It's just Nynaeve is recognizing that there's some lingering effects of Matt having have used the horn, and this is gonna be super important for him as a character, but the summary points of it are that he is seeing memories, or he thinks he's seeing things that happened so long ago that they could have been memories, and that's, like, why he's able to speak the language a little bit, but he doesn't even know what he's really grasping at. But when Nynaeve sits him down and says, "Focus, what are you hearing and feeling?" He says, like, he hears death, battles, crying, all these things playing out. I don't know how much I can say on it, but just know that this is gonna be something that definitely comes back because it literally puts him in the trance, and then, he's looking at the cards, which the cards part of it all, that was probably a little bit of a difference because if I remember from the books, Kyle, am I right that the cards come out of the cards and they're like fighting? I can't really necessarily
Yeah,
remember. They actually physically come out of the cards and are like trying to stab and stuff. But it's similar
Okay.
enough that I got
Mhm.
the
yeah.
vibe, and
He's
I appreciate that they did that.
he's playing a late night poker game with some bros, and then I think they're kinda thinking he might even have a thing where he's like, "Am I, like, this drunk or something?"
Yeah.
And they're, like, the kings and, like, they're coming out of the cards and, like,
Mhm.
fighting the people in the room, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was his experience also related to land fear? That's what was
Mhm.
kind of hard for me to determine. So everyone besides what Nynaeve was experiencing here was land fear related.
Yes.
Which,
Mhm.
my god, man, she gets stabbed, we find out later, 11 times by this gray man, which was a big change from the books and very something, like, we definitely need to talk about, but that was gruesome, and then thank God Moraine was in the next room because, like I said earlier, if she wasn't, like, that's death, of course, but Moraine's a
Moraine,
good.
thank God Lan was in the next room. Moraine was gonna
Yeah.
let her actually die and bleed out probably.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
true.
yeah, 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 yeah. He got her there.
That's
Because
true.
we do see that like dark shaded silhouette follow Moraine into the inn or wherever they're staying, but they don't really touch on it. But we do find out that it was this gray man that shows up, and I think there was what 15 times people were shanked total in this episode, and I think for every one I let out a gasp just because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So it
Yeah,
was
I think
unbelievable.
people there were 1, 2, 3, probably 4, 5 plus 11 and
11,
it
yeah,
ended in
Ending
exactly.
it.
1 death.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
at
I'm
least
glad that they kick us off with all this, this gore because, I honestly forget that the Wheel of Time is this gruesome at points, I feel like we get I think of episode 1 of season 1 with the Trollocs, but
mm.
besides that, this was, like, hard to watch almost.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I loved the Nynaeve and Matt of it all before everything goes to hell. I think it's just great. We're getting this reinforcement, this characterization of the way that Nynaeve feels about all of these kids. Essentially, she has a very motherly instinct towards all of them. She really wants to help Matt. And as we see at the end, Matt is actually really wants to be helped as well, which is good. And I'm enjoying the fact that they're linking the two of them. I think probably harder than they're linked in the books at this point and like dealing with this stuff. So I
Was
hope
Lanfear
that that goes well.
was Lanfear embodying, like, their biggest fears, like, for the fact that Rand could potentially be this madman, and then for Perrin, obviously, he has a history with axes, and then that's kind of what I was gathering a little bit, was that she was using their darkest fears almost against him.
This is somewhere where the book knowledge doesn't quite cut it because this is different than the books. So Luke, I think, mentioned it that these things happen, but the change they've made here, and this kind of gets us to our last scene in this bucket, is that it is Lanfear doing it. Not entirely sure what kind of weaves she's using to do this.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how she uses the power this way because in the books, it's much more of this nebulous power that they call the bubbles of evil. So essentially, we have learned that there is a concept called the pattern, which is kind of everyone's life as an individual thread in the pattern and the weaving of the pattern. The wheel weaves the pattern of the age, which is just it's directing everyone's individual thread of a life into the tapestry of the world, essentially. And there's a concept that there are bubbles of evil that ride along the pattern. And when they burst, crazy things like this happen. They haven't done a ton of that more like fantastical stuff yet in the show. And obviously, they're not doing it here with that. So it's completely random and it's like very soft magic-y
Mhm.
in the books where it's like, "Oh, wow, okay, that was a bubble of evil." And then here it's very purposeful. It's Lanfear is doing it in some way.
Okay.
Not sure if we'll really get any type of explanation about it.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
But I do think you're right, exactly right in saying it's very purposeful manifestations of their own issues, their own internal kind of conflicts. All right. So the way to segue out of this into what is kind of pretty much our last bucket is that Lanfear is unaware of the gray man. Lan comes riding in hard. He's got that like little that thumb move where the Malkieri sword's coming out of that sheath a little bit because he is kind of
Thunderclap
telling
and flash.
Lanfear exactly that Nynaeve got stabbed 11 times. I don't really mean to laugh, but it is funny because she's not dead. And Lanfear is completely unaware of the gray man thing. DEFCON 5, I think is the highest the DEFCONs go, or do they go
Yes.
down? I don't doesn't matter. DEFCON
Defcon 5.
5, and Lanfear's like, "Holy shit, okay, Gray Man, only one Forsaken is capable of making those. We gotta get Rand the fuck out of the city." And this next bucket is going to be that Forsaken Mogideon, Mogadine, Mogi, Mogi, whatever you want to end up saying. This is the last scene of the episode. We met her in the last scene of season 2 finale, where she gets the better of Lanfear, which was awesome. And I dare I say this scene was better.
Okay, 2 things as a reader of this. In the audiobooks, the narrators switch how they
Yeah.
pronounce it halfway through, so I am gonna be all over the place.
Still love you, Kate Redding, but yeah.
Yeah, Mogadine what do they say in the show, Mogideon?
See, I don't know. I only
Okay,
know it in the way
okay.
that, yeah,
Yeah,
it's whatever.
exactly.
People will
Her s
know. People will know.
her magic is just, like, spidery, it's so cool, and this scene, I dare you all to try watching it without subtitles, like, my god, I
Dude,
couldn't get
literally
anything.
piece nothing together because I think she says a name, but I might have also been just hearing things because I no subtitles again. I couldn't understand it.
So this man, his name is Jaichim Karadin.
Okay.
So he is, again, at this point, he's a gray man. So how much will we actually get about his past? Essentially, he is a dark friend. He, I'm just gonna go out and say this because I don't know if we'll get the confirmation of it or not, and it's really not a spoiler, and it's too fun to keep it to myself. So he would have been the white cloak that was at the Dark Friends social in the season 2 premiere.
Okay.
So we have
Okay.
them all hooded up, and we know that there's a Shinar in there, which should have been Ingtar, but they
What?
totally pissed on his grave and
Yeah.
down his throat in season 2, which we'll leave behind us. We have the one of the Sean Chen members with the long fingernails, which we found out to be Lady Surath, and then there was a white cloak there, which I'm just gonna say was Jaichim Karadin, because he is a dark friend in the books. And man, Moggy's got him just completely strung up, and she says to him, "That's your blood, I'm freezing it." Is what she's doing to him. She's trying to get him to basically say, "Just make me a gray man. Just make me a
Mhm.
gray man." She wants him to want it. I think I probably would have said the same thing if you're freezing my blood while I'm suspended in the air. So that's exactly what she does to him. She gives him, let's say, what he wants, what he asks for, and makes him a gray man. The visualization of this was better than I could have anticipated and expected. I just thought it looked so cool. It was terrifying. She's
Yes.
unbelievable.
The
Mhm.
Forsaken are the best, man. I'm gonna say this every time we see a Forsaken, they are the best. They make this story work so well.
I mean, this was a great follow up introduction to Mogideon, however you want to call her, because yeah, like you said, I think this was definitely better than the first time we met her, and even that first interaction was really cool
She
because we get
catches
to
land fear in the first
so
interaction, she,
I
like,
also wanted to
frees her.
bring that up too, because the way she freezes her very much reminded me how, the 2 Black Ajas trapped Swan Shanche for a second before
Yeah.
Moraine has to save her. It was that same spell, I think it was that they were using on each other, but I guess Mogideon has a more refined version of it all, but
Mhm.
this is the kind of character introductions that we're talking about. It's like a just a very powerful, like this character is here and they are a problem. Let it be known. It just felt like a very anime-esque intro to someone, just get them
And
in on the
just think
side.
about
Yeah.
that there's 5 other ones just around, like, think about the power, like, it's just so cool, like, the build up
And
to this, it's gonna be
I
awesome.
think did they talk about it earlier in this episode that Lanfear kind of fears all of them? It's not just Mogideon, that she fears all of the other Forsaken that are now free. So just such high expectations going forward with the rest of the Forsaken now that we've only been introduced to this is now our third one, I believe. I can't
And they've
imagine 5 more of these people just running around.
I
Yeah.
was just gonna say they've hit it out of the ballpark with these first 3. My
Yeah.
note that I
Oh,
had
yeah.
too on this scene is, it literally just says, I mean, just wow. They were absolutely cooking with gas in the writers' room when they thought of this scene, the way that they visualize it. I mean, to kind of get into the nitty-gritty ish rather of this, essentially what she's doing to him is that she's taking away his soul, but keeping his body alive. That's where, like, you see, like, kind of the mist come out of his back, which is supposed to
White
be the
Walkers.
visualization, yeah, of his soul leaving his body.
Mhm.
And the gray men are just, I think, I thought one of my favorite parts of the books. They're so subtle on purpose. Sometimes you don't even notice that a gray man's in a scene until, like, way after, or if I had to look it up on a wiki, but essentially, they are assassins that are, like, they call them gray men because they are just perfectly average is how they describe them. They're average in looks, they're average in height, they're average in build, like, you're because they have no soul, like, the pattern doesn't recognize that they have a soul, it renders them virtually imperceptible. That's why Moraine really had no idea that he was walking around. That's why he could literally walk right into the inn. No one, like, you're I think they talk about it in the books a little bit too, that when you look at them, your eyes almost, like, slide past them.
Mhm. You
Like,
can't
you
focus on them.
almost yeah, you almost can't see them,
That's
It's
so
such a
and
cool idea. It's such
Mhm.
a cool
yeah,
idea. Yeah.
and there's a really, really cool scene in the 3rd book, which this season is kind of flirting between book 3 and book 4, more heavily probably book 4, that I really hope we get with Gray Men, so I won't talk about it now, but I just love the introduction of this. I'm really hoping they might play a bigger role because now we have a kind of a named character that became a Gray Man, so I just again, another thing for us to have our satellites up about. Season 2 felt like we've really learned, I think especially Dave, you and Paul, and anyone who's not read the books, of the idea that anyone can be a dark friend,
Mhm.
you know? And I think they reinforced that a little bit here too, but now we're also getting, okay, are there gray men like, how many gray men are there around, Are
Mhm.
is a gray man gonna pop up? All that stuff. So they're just making the world, I think, so well lived in and developed, and it feels great.
Mhm. Yeah, I love the concept of these gray men. I my questions just, like, immediately go to what are they capable of? Like, are they capable of having conversations? Do they only take orders from O'Gideon? You know, just basic power scaling stuff like that that I'm curious to see going forward. Yeah, I great introduction. Great introduction.
Mhm.
Yeah. My last comment here before I think we get into more of like a wrap up kind of conversation is that this, I think, is a great example of them moving from 14 Forsaken to 8. She's kind of taking on a little bit of a role she didn't have in the books as being someone who can create gray men, who can create these kind of minions of the Dark One. And I really think it's only going to be a positive thing. The
Yeah.
Forsaken have been great, and it's just good. Give the ones that we have more things, make them cooler, make them
Mhm.
more terrifying. I think the show's only going to benefit from it.
Mhm. And then I think we say that the Emmonsfield 5 all split up? Like, that's kind of like the conclusion of
No,
this
that's
episode?
it, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just to summarize that, what happens is, like, they all are gonna split up, like, that's just kind of the takeaway from this scene where Matt's gonna stay with Nynaeve in the city because Matt needs to figure out how to heal himself, and he thinks that his best chance is to be around Nynaeve, who is gonna decide to stay in Tarvalon until she can get control of her power, so that's cool, that's gonna be their storyline. We find out that who is it that, Perrin, it's gonna be Perrin, Loyal,
Loyal.
and then the other 2 Aiel.
So yeah, so Chiad is the one that has tow to Loyal because Loyal saved her, and then Bane is the one that just says, "I go where she goes." So those
Right.
4 are heading back to the 2 rivers.
So they're gonna be a squad, and then the last group is well, I guess the last thing that happens too is because Lan and Nynaeve are gonna split, we have that nice scene where he ends
Mhm.
up giving her his mother's ring, which is a symbol basically of her being his queen, I think is what he said, or like something like that. I
Yeah,
didn't really
yeah,
know.
I think you could interpret the scene 2 ways. The first time I was like, "Oh, okay, so he's, like, proposing to her
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
this point." But then I also kind of the second time I watched it, when he says, "In any life, I would want no other woman as my queen, Nynaeve, in any life we could have lived." And I was like, "Okay, is that him more like the books where in his mind it's like, just take this memento of me, so, like, you don't forget me as we go our separate ways and I, head into my battle with the shadow." And she's probably taking like, "Oh my god, he gave me his ring, like, that's a proposal, like,
Mhm.
we're engaged," that's kind of what happens in the book, so that might be something maybe to watch out for.
Yeah, and then
Pretty
Rand
sweet, though.
decides to make the swerve here where he's saying, we're going to the Aiel Waste," is what he says, right?
Yeah, and that squad ends up being Aviendha and Egwene stick by Rand, obviously for different reasons. Egwene wants to stick by him because she thinks she owes it to him, kind of in a way. And then Aviendha is sticking with him because he's the Kara Karn, and she has the duty kind of to protect him. And he, in her mind, I think this is one of my favorite parts too about Aviendha. In her mind, he has a duty to her too. Like he is her, if he is her chief of chiefs, like he has a duty to do that. He has to uphold his end of the bargain. And she almost probably in her mind is like, I gotta babysit this mofo a little bit. Like I gotta keep him alive. I gotta keep, I gotta cover his sick. So that's why she's with him.
Yeah, at least in terms of those 3 stories, obviously Rand's is gonna be number 1 most locked in for. I will say the Matt and Nynaeve Elaine stuff doesn't interest me as of right now. It just seems like, they're just hanging around the White Tower. They're gonna help Matt with his case or whatever he's got going on, but definitely I would put Perrin's storyline second because obviously we still have no idea what's going on with the wolf. He's a wolf brother is what they're called.
Yep.
Yeah, so we don't really know too much more beyond what we already do know about all that, so very interested to see that. I'm not feeling good about Elaine and Avienda in terms of I don't know, I think Avienda could catch a stray in this journey that she's on with Rand here. So I'll put
Are you
that on
putting
the
that on the
board.
board?
Yeah, because I feel like
Yeah.
we've been in a point where in the shows that I've been watching and covering, I feel like we're getting a lot of, like, build up for this love interest and they're splitting, and something bad goes happen to one of the characters. I won't spoil Invincible specifically, but I just these I'm too cautious of these happy times with people. I think these relationships and as you guys said, this is book 3 of 14 seasons,
Mm.
the
Yeah.
Elaine and Avienda, they're very different while this could just be a fling, so I'll put it on the board now.
And as I look back at your board, you did have last season that Rand and Egwene are gonna end up together. Their end game there. So
Very
you're
confident in
keeping
that.
an
See,
eye
I
on these
told you, I
relationships.
I know how this show is gonna end already. I just have
You
all the information.
as a subsect of that, you have Lanfear and Egwene fighting. So that should be interesting.
Say it
And I
one more
guess
time,
also
Egwene and Lanfear? Oh, I'll stick
yes,
by
Fighting.
that
fighting.
because,
Yeah.
1, they're already kind of opposite sides, but they're also, the jealousy of fighting over, Rand/Lews Therin. I'll stick by that one. See, like, you want me to write the books for you guys or, like, I can rewrite them in my own?
And maybe don't toot your horn too early in that you mentioned earlier that Swan might have death vibes, and you also said that in season 1. You said Swan has death
Swan
vibes.
still does have death vibes. I still
Yeah,
think she's gonna die at some point, and it was
yeah. No,
crazy that
you
we
said that
got the
earlier in
fake
this
out,
episode.
and we got the fake out too. She almost bit the bullet there at the beginning, but Moraine, too good.
All right, that was actually a great advertisement for the board. I guess we can just officially name it. We've got these show only guys that are doing a great job of watching the scenes, interpreting them, putting out predictions on what they're seeing. And that's, I think, for me, one of my favorite parts of the podcast itself. Before we wrap up though, time for our MVP and LVP segment. I re-listened to season 2, and I think Paul went first 6 out of 8 times, so that's never we cannot let that keep happening because it's so ridiculous. I kept catching myself like, "Why the heck are we letting him go first?" But
We don't
Dave,
double up, right? We can't double up, right? We're not allowed
No.
to.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
no,
now
no.
once an
Yeah,
MVP or
he's
an LVP is taken, then they're actually they're off the board completely. So, yeah, Paul was just benefiting from stepping in front of the line. So, Dave, how about you go first for our first,
I
MVP,
will
LVP of
I will
season 3?
gladly go first. My MVP is going to be Elaine. I think she offered Rand the advice of a lifetime here, and that Rand took him to heart. He is now going to side with what Elaine told him and needs to go to the Aiel. I think she was great and she got some action. I'm happy for her. So I think I'm going to put her as our MVP. She really set the way for our dragon. MVP or LVP, I should say, could go to a lot of people, to be honest, in this episode, I think. I'm willing to give it to Moraine. I would have given Moraine the MVP if we had maybe ended the episode like at the halfway, like 30 minutes in. She saves Swan. She does all this, but she is the reason Nynaeve got stabbed 11 times. Her ability to just not care of like the emotions and just togetherness that this friend group have, and instead of just like riding that train and trusting them as a group, she wants to separate them so bad that she's willing to get all of them stabbed. So I'll give Moraine my LVP this episode.
Go ahead,
Me?
Luke.
Alright,
Yeah.
so my MVP is gonna be Egwene because she's badass and she crushed that just getting raised to an Aes Sedai in the span of 20 minutes, so that was pretty cool, or accepted, I should say. And then it also she directly caused the best scene of the show to happen, so she gets the MVP. And then the LVP, it was gonna be Moraine, but I'll give it to Leandrin just because
Yeah.
she deserves it, man. She's a
Yeah, that was
bloody
the obvious one. Yeah.
villain that she just caused so much chaos. She deserves it just on just attacking everybody in the throne room, so
Well deserved. I
how about
wanted
you,
to go the
Kyle?
generic route with her, but I kept it
Yeah.
simple.
I think my MVP is gonna be Matt. It's slightly reluctant. The whole episode leading up to the night where all the chaos happens, I was like, "Easy, Matt. It's gonna be Matt. It's gonna be Matt." And then he's standing there while Nynaeve's getting stabbed 11 times, and I was like, "Oh, that's gonna hurt you on the grading scale," but we're
Was a
gonna say
bad
it wasn't
moment.
his fault, and
Yep.
we're gonna keep him as the MVP because I thought he had the best lines. He just feels right. He just feels correct to me, and I'm loving every second of it. And LVP, Dave, I think I'll say the opposite of you. I find it very difficult to put an LVP out there. I thought the episode as a whole was fantastic with things like that. So I'm gonna say Naomi Sedai. How you gonna betray Varen and Adelius? They
Yeah.
watched you grow
Yeah,
up.
that's
I'm sure
fair.
they gave you so much advice and mentorship. I mean, just not cool. Leandra and I can believe, but Naomi Sedai, not
Fair.
cool, not cool.
Mhm.
All right, that's gonna do it. Season 3, episode 1. We had some kerfuffles and audio problems as we were recording. I'm looking at the clock that says 2 hours. No way the episode will be that long. We're focusing on trying not to make the episodes that long this season. But if you like what you heard, best way to support us is gonna be subscribing on whatever you're listening on and or watching on if you're watching our beautiful faces on YouTube. And then the greatest way to join the conversation with us, I thought we were very successful with this in season 2, especially, is to join the Discord or leave some YouTube comments. We'll try to get all the YouTube comments, but joining the Discord is the best way, I think, to consistently engage with us and our community, which creates the perfect segue into talking about the community itself of Bingetown TV. So you are listening to us on the Binge Empire feed, but Bingetown TV is much more than Binge Empire and The Wheel of Time. We have The Core is our podcast that's focused totally on Apple TV. That's covering Severance right now, which has been popping off. Severance, arguably probably the most popular TV show in the world at this moment. And on Dark and Twisted, which is our feed that covers kind of procedural mysteries, anything that gets a little supernatural and spooky scary. It's covering Yellow Jackets, again, one of the more popular shows in the world at this moment. We're also covering The White Lotus a little bit on that feed. Dave has put in some perfect breadcrumbs for our coverage of the show Invincible, also on Amazon Prime. You'll find that on our Final Form podcast. So that's our anime and animation focused podcast where we're covering Invincible and Solo Leveling. And then our last podcast, I want to say last, I don't know, sometimes I lose count, is Unreal, is our reality kind of TV competition show focused podcast feed. We just wrapped up covering the traders. I only plug that because I'm on it and we had an absolute blast covering the traders. So, all of that to say, join the Discord. All right. That's the best way to interact with us, chat with everyone that watches the shows with us. You'll get a lot of inspiration for TV shows and all of that. And then check out those feeds that I just mentioned and subscribe to them if you like it. All right. That is going to do it for the first time of season 3 of Amazon Prime's The Wheel of Time. We are the Binge Empire Podcast, and thank you so much for listening.